Yo, welcome to the show. World War II flow. Saoirse Teagan lyric, ready to go.
Saoirse with the facts.
Teagan digs deep. Lyric tells the stories. History we keep. World War II tales from front to home. Learning the past wherever we roam. Tune in, get ready for a journey back with Saoirse Teagan lyric on track.
When the sun rose on that fateful day, the Nazis invaded the Netherlands. Without warning or the slightest provocation, they unleashed upon their innocent neighbor the full terror and fury of a devastating blitzkrieg. The force of the Luftwaffe was revealed to a shocked country. A purposeful army floated relentlessly down from the skies to penetrate hard-held lines of defense. Swiftly, they paralyzed communications and destroyed transportation. There was no stopping this ravaging horde. And when negotiations for surrender had already been concluded, Rotterdam Center was blown to bits, systematically, completely, shamelessly.
The Netherlands believed that declaring their neutrality would keep them safe as it had during the First World War. This proved to only work for a few short months, as the Nazis invaded the country along with other neighboring countries Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. The invasion occurred the morning of May 10, 1940. The battle lasted until the 15th of May, when the main Dutch forces surrendered to the Germans. The country was occupied in full on May 17th, following resistance from the province of Zeeland. Following the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in May of 1940, the royal family made a narrow escape. They first landed in London, England. There, the reigning queen, Her Majesty Queen Wilhelmina, and son-in-law Prince Bernard stayed to form a government in exile. Queen Wilhelmina feared for her daughter's safety due to the constant London air raids. Because of this, she decided to send both her daughter and 2 grandchildren to Canada. They landed in Halifax on June 11th of that year, later making their way to Ottawa, where they eventually set up residence at 120 Lansing Road, better known as the Stornoway House. Over the 5 years they spent in Ottawa, an unbreakable bond between the Royals and Canada was formed. Crown Princess Juliana joined in on community events and supported the war efforts, while their 2 eldest daughters attended school, went shopping, and even went to the movies. On January 19, 1943, the Crown Princess gave birth to her 3rd daughter, Princess Marguerite, in an Ottawa hospital. To ensure that the princess would be born Dutch, the hospital room was temporarily declared extraterritorial, meaning she would still be considered Dutch. Because of this, and Canada's welcoming attitude towards the royals, there will forever be a bond between the 2 nations. The Allied forces started off strong by recapturing Antwerp, Belgium, one of Europe's biggest ports at the time, on September 3, 1944. This was a huge triumph for the Allied forces because it meant they would be able to ship supplies to soldiers within Europe. There was just one problem. The nearly 70-kilometer estuary that connected Antwerp's port to the North Sea was still occupied by the Nazis. The task of clearing the estuary was given to the 1st Canadian Army. A previous attempt to liberate the Netherlands was made in September of 1944, following the liberation of France. The operation in question was called Operation Market Garden. The operation was one of the most controversial episodes in World War II history, led by British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. He believed that if the operation was completed successfully, the war would be over by Christmas. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Poor weather conditions, failed communications,
I can't hear you.
What? Strong German opposition led to the failure of Operation Market Garden. Under the leadership of Lieutenant General Guy Simonds, Canadian and British soldiers fought a series of grueling battles through October to early November. The road to liberation was clearer than ever. With the estuary and its main islands being secured by the Allied forces, it only took a mere few weeks before the estuary was used to ship and deliver supplies and food to the soldiers fighting in northwestern Europe on the 28th of November. Following the fight for the Scheldt, there was a 3-month period of vigorous planning. With very little change in occupation and liberation, the Dutch people had one of the most grueling winters to date. The Dutch Hunger Winter, during 1944 through 1945, was responsible for nearly 20,000 deaths. The Battle of the Rhineland fought to move Germans eastward, over the Rhine River, with every push. In February of 1945, the first advance was made. By that March, the 1st Canadian Army was reinforced by various Allied units, including the 1st Canadian Corps. This marked the first time in history that 2 Canadian corps were fighting together. Following one of the country's worst winters, Canadian troops facilitated the arrival of food, fuel, and other aid supplies to a population in the midst of starvation. Many Canadians played key roles in the liberation of the Netherlands, such as Bernard Montgomery and Lieutenant General Guy Simonds. But today, I'd like to discuss one of over 7,000 who didn't make it back home to Canada. Harry Brott was fighting in the city of Apeldoorn on the 15th of April when he was hit by a German artillery shell. Among those who were affected by the artillery shell was Nellie van den Berg, a Dutch woman whose house was destroyed. Following Brott's death, Nellie wrote to his widow, Ruth, back in Canada, to inform her of the sad news. The two women stayed in contact for decades following the war. This story is a beautiful example of the bond formed between Canada and the Netherlands that still remains today. Over 7,600 Canadian soldiers lost their lives fighting to liberate the Dutch from the Nazis. To this day, they are still remembered by locals, Canadian veterans, and tourists alike. Every year, Dutch students plant a singular tulip bud to honor the Canadian soldiers in the War Cemetery in Holton. The fight to liberate the Netherlands will go down in history as one of Canada's greatest triumphs, marking the first time 2 Canadian corps fought together in battle and the largest army ever commanded by a Canadian officer. The victories of Canada's brave men and women are still being celebrated and honored today. Every May 5th, the Netherlands celebrate Liberation Day to mark the end of the Nazi occupation. As a lead-up to the annual event, thousands upon thousands of tulip buds are shipped to Canada's capital city, Ottawa, in appreciation of Canada's sacrifices and bravery.